Welcome everyone to the 115th Celebrity Synastry chart reading, where we will be covering Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Madeline and it is so nice to meet you. On this channel, I look at the dynamic between two celebrities using astrology. For those new and returning, I take notes on a synastry chart looking at the personal planets, signs, aspects, and of birth times available house overlays. I share these notes and add my extra insights and interpretations along the way. So if that sounds good to you, subscribe and click the bell to join us weekly, and let's get right into this one. Starting off with the sun, we have Liz's sun in Pisces and Eddie's sun in Leo. Eddie easily overpowers Liz, and Liz needs to learn to be explicit with Eddie, so I guess like asserting herself when she does tend to be overpowered, potentially. Liz is okay with Eddie's need for being adored, and Liz's elusiveness and subtlety frustrates Eddie. Elizabeth's sun overlaid in Eddie's 7th house. It's a love-hate relationship, but just from what we're getting so far, it seems like Eddie wants to have the spotlight on him. And like, to be fair, I obviously can't speak for at the time how things were, but in terms of legacy, what we're seeing now, Elizabeth is definitely the biggest star compared to Eddie Fisher. Like, he's now just known as like Carrie Fisher's dad. He's not really known in his own right, which I assume would be a conflict. You know, Eddie, who wants to be this sort of like star of the show, and you're married to Elizabeth Taylor, like, you know, that would be love-hate, create some love-hate dynamic, I'm sure. They feel united together and they are both deeply moved by each other. They can both get in each other's heads and they both get a sense that they are complementary. Both are subconsciously trying to prove they are separate from the relationship, which again, if there is an issue of like Eddie wanting to be in the spotlight, you're not exactly going to want to be quite like well tied to Elizabeth Taylor, because then you're just like, you know, her husband, not really Eddie Fisher in your own right, if that makes sense. They both feel the other is a big presence in their life, and they both need to find a balance to make this relationship work. They both may be driven to express themselves in extreme ways, and possibility of their personalities being lost in their relationship. Eddie's sun overlaid in Elizabeth's 8th house. There's a strong bond and emotional dependence, and Eddie is captivated by Liz. Eddie may feel he cannot leave, and Liz has the ability to transform Eddie. They both feel initially afraid of this relationship, and Liz may come into Eddie's life when he is at the bottom. The way my brain is going, because from my knowledge, obviously Eddie Fisher, I want to say it's not Debbie Fisher. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get so judged for this. Carrie Fisher's mother though, like obviously they would have had to get together before him and Elizabeth. So maybe was there some kind of situation, I don't know, he was like afraid to be with Elizabeth for like whatever reason because of Debbie, particularly considering like Eddie being at the bottom, like something must have like collapsed, gone wrong, something like that. They both weirdly enjoy the darkness and depth of the relationship. Elizabeth's sun square Eddie's moon. There are basic misunderstandings and practical disagreements occur. Eddie sees Liz as too rational and selfish, and Liz sees Eddie as too sensitive and emotional. It's a relationship of general discontent. I mean, there does seem to be a bit more of a love-hate, like weird strong bond, but like a bad strong, but like sort of a karmic bond is what's coming to my head, but hopefully we'll see more. Eddie may feel resentful towards Liz over time. I assume this is just towards like potentially her rising success. Attraction only exists when tension and competition does, which goes back to how we just saw they both weirdly enjoy the darkness and depth of the relationship. Potentially they enjoy the chaos they have together. Elizabeth's sun square Eddie's Mars. Sparks fly, and there's a competitive nature to this. There's a tendency to interrupt each other, which I assume this would be more coming from Ed, because we did see right in the beginning he tends to overpower Liz, and she needs to learn how to, you know, assert herself. Individual egos create problems. I feel like a record player is saying this, but like it seems like Ed. It's productive to work on a mutual goal together. Did they meet on some kind of like project or movie? So I'm pretty sure Eddie's an actor. I have to assume so. Based off like, you know, Carrie and everything and the connection she has. So I wonder if, you know, they met for some projects and that's how they kindled things. They both need to stop focusing on the details, and Liz feels challenged by Eddie's dominance. We're seeing again. So he seems to really want to be like in the spotlight, the little show pony. They both need to respect each other's natural habits, which we did see those practical disagreements occur, and there is general discontent. I wonder, considering like the chaos of it seems like they enjoy that sort of chaos side of things. I wonder if when they started living together potentially and they settled down more, that's when the discontent started, because, the relationship started getting stale, there was less chaos, it was more routine and practical. They over time get more annoyed with each other, which we did see that Eddie over time feels more resentful towards Liz, so that's there. Elizabeth's sun, sextile Eddie's Jupiter. Liz energizes Eddie and they are good travel companions. That's a good thing. And I assume like not a very static thing to do that would, actually excite them a bit. It's not like a, boring routine task of like, living together, having domestic life. Mutual respect remains after the end. I mean, bit of a spoiler alert, these two did end things eventually. So I have to assume like maybe we'll see a bit more like post the relationship, but mutual respect is seen. They both want to make the other happy, and Eddie opens up new doors for Liz. Interesting. Eddie boosts Liz's self-confidence, and they both will have increased confidence here. Eddie frequently gives Liz the benefit of the doubt, which we did see how he is quite generous with her, so that's repeated in a way. Elizabeth's sun square Eddie's Saturn. Eddie sacrifices his freedom, and they both attempt to support each other. I see this because, they're in the same industry and there doesn't seem to be pure hate so far in this relationship. So I'm sure they would, particularly how we did see like Eddie's quite generous with Liz. He's opening up new doors for her and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised. But we also have seen the little bits of hate and like the competitiveness here. I'm sure that would throw an interesting spanner in the works when you're wanting to be supportive of each other, but you're quite competitive together in a similar industry. Liz may outgrow Eddie. Is that potentially why maybe Eddie gets more frustrated with Liz? It sort of is this thing of like, she's not the same person he married. She, changed and everything, and that sort of, the more changes, the more resentful Eddie became. They both will mature, and Eddie tends to be too critical of Liz. Liz feels blocked and discouraged by Eddie, which we're seeing back to the beginning where she needs to, be a bit more explicit with Eddie, which does kind of imply that, she is more overpowered, verbally wise, communication wise. They both can learn a lot, and Liz sees Eddie as all the traditions she wants to overcome. I wonder in what way though, because I have to assume like, back in that sort of like, I need to get a timeline for when these people get married, because I'm imagining like 50s, 60s time, I'm going to say, when these two approximately were married. In that sort of time, obviously, like we know that like Eddie did have like a family before Elizabeth, so he wouldn't obviously be a very traditional guy if in that sort of time period you have a previous family when you get married, and having even a second marriage in the first place. I guess in Hollywood, that is also a different standard. But like traditionally for that time, it is not very traditional. So I imagine he's not the most traditional of people. So I just wonder what sort of traditions he has that Liz will be wanting to overcome, if that makes sense. Liz may feel romantically rejected by Eddie, and they both need to really want this relationship to work. Eddie's sun square Elizabeth's moon, so this is a repeated aspect, just inverted, so everything from before is further emphasized, but also Liz sees Eddie as too rational and selfish. Not really surprisingly, so if he wants to be a center of attention, you're obviously selfish. Eddie sees Liz as too sensitive and emotional, and Liz may feel resentful towards Eddie over time. I guess it kind of is. Is it a good thing if you're both feeling resentful to each other over time? Because at least it's like a mutual decision to end things. It wasn't, one leaving the other or anything like that, and leaving the other one heartbroken, Eddie's sun, Trine Elizabeth's Venus. There is mutual attraction and they both value each other. It's a harmonious relationship, but I feel like this is one of those when they're like fire is hot, it's good, but I think it's more of like a fireworks type relationship rather than a fireplace one. if that makes sense. There needs to be some kind of like movement going on rather than like static energy, you know. They're financially lucky people. I'm pretty sure both of them would have been like pretty good in both their careers around the time they got married, so it's not really that surprising, is it? They both share common interests and they accept and tolerate each other. Liz is willing to do anything to please Eddie. So again, there seems to be a bit of an element where Liz is a bit more of like the submissive one. I don't want to say the doormat, but like she does seem to be wanting to please Eddie, like putting Eddie on a bit of a pedestal in a way. You know, we did see that she needs to learn to assert herself, and Eddie seems to be a bit more of a bearing and all of that. Liz finds Eddie charming and intriguing, and Eddie feels more loving and beautiful around Liz, which this is, again, we're seeing how they both, you know, their self-confidence comes up and boosts in this relationship, which is nice. Eddie's Sun conjunct Elizabeth's Jupiter. It's a friendship and they're a lucky couple. I wonder like how they met. That's a bit weird to me, like friendship, and we did see that they're both initially afraid of this relationship. I'm just a bit suspicious considering, like, I mean, both of them were obviously married before. So I don't know if those two had any things to play at it. Like, it's all a bit weird to me. There's an optimistic meeting and there is healthy competition. We're seeing the competition again. I imagine it would be healthy until a point of like where the other is getting too successful, particularly for Eddie. They enjoy travel together, we're seeing again, and they are open with each other. They have lots of faith in each other and overindulgence can easily happen, and benefit of the doubt is commonplace, which we did see a couple times on Eddie's end for Liz. Eddie's Sun, Trine Elizabeth's Uranus. They start as friends and Eddie inspires Liz. Frequent changes occur and they get each other's humor. It's a relationship of experimentation. So it seems to be the theme with these two, that they both need like movement and like a bit of like chaos for like them to really keep things, you know, alive and wanting each other. They encourage each other to be themselves and it's an interesting and progressive relationship. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to say like these two specifically together are progressive, but like how they got here is progressive, especially for the time, you know, previous marriages and like for Eddie family. I'm not sure if Elizabeth already had kids before Eddie at this point. Point is, it is a progressive way to get there. So that's why I'm like, I feel like potentially the point where we did see that Liz wants to overcome Eddie's traditions, I feel like that is being more like overpowered as we go, because like what traditions? Eddie thinks of Liz as inspiring and exciting, and Liz tries to keep the relationship interesting. Eddie may feel threatened by Liz's need for freedom. I want to skew this a bit. I feel like freedom to like go to work and like make her career better and bigger and, you know, boost herself, make herself more famous and all of that than Eddie. They both need to encourage the other's independence. I mean, I agree with this considering we did see like a couple points that are like indicating that domestically they're not really the best and most compatible. Now for the intermission, this video is brought to you by me, my Etsy store, Adeline the Astrologer. If you ever watch this and think, hey, I would like her to read my Synastry chart, well, I will. I do personalized Synastry chart readings on my Etsy store. I do both basic and detailed ones. The basic ones are a bit more simple to understand and really good for those just beginning out in astrology, getting their heads around it, or just as a fun gift idea. The detailed readings are very similar to what I do here, so it's a lot of it just with my insights and interpretation on the chart. So if you're interested in that and everything else, astrology and tarot, readings and gifts, definitely check out my Etsy store for that. I'm always releasing new other things there as well. And you can even just favorite the store just to support me for free. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the reading. So now it's time for moon. We have Elizabeth's moon in Scorpio and Eddie's moon in Gemini. They have different emotional natures. I wonder, because we did see like they both see each other as too emotional. I wonder if like that is emotions in different ways. Liz is not as detached as Eddie, and Liz may become possessive of Eddie. Interesting. Liz may want more than Eddie can give, and sometimes Liz feels Eddie does not care. I mean, because we did see a couple times already, just like implying that Eddie is just a bit more overbearing. He tends to interrupt and all of that. There are communication difficulties. So If I were Liz, I would kind of relate. Like, honestly, if someone's a bit more overbearing of you, tends to interrupt you, you could very easily think that person just doesn't care about you. They sometimes have difficulty understanding each other. Elizabeth's moon overlaid in Eddie's third house. There's a cooperative and friendly atmosphere. A lot of friendly has been repeated in this relationship. So I wonder if they really did start out as friends or like met on some project together and had like an acquaintance friendship. Liz admires Eddie's lifestyle. Okay. Liz is supportive of Eddie's priorities and Eddie enjoys Liz's company. Eddie thinks of Liz often and it's a relaxed and productive relationship. They don't irritate each other and they communicate well. I feel like these 2 points are only really like would manifest if they encourage each other's independence, because again, I feel like if they really did live together, I feel like that would be very irritating for the other. It doesn't seem like domestically they're quite mesh well. Eddie's moon overlaid in Elizabeth's sixth house. Eddie has conflicting feelings towards Liz. I mean, I'm not really surprised. Like, on one hand, he seems to really want to like help her, like help her flourish and bloom and all of that, but also seems to be a bit threatened by her success. Both are too helpful to each other, which we did see, like Eddie opening up doors and everything. And I guess you could see like both of them boosting each other's confidence as a way of helping the other. This can be beneficial if working towards a mutual goal, and it's easy to create a resentful relationship. Not surprisingly so, on both sides we saw that over time they get more resentful of each other and all of that, so I'm not surprised it's repeated. Liz's moon is square Eddie's Mercury. Liz is not understanding of Eddie's communication. I mean, in a way, I agree and disagree because, you know, I guess if someone is interrupting a lot, maybe that is their way of communication in terms of like they just think very fast and just want to like get it, all of it out there. You know, but someone I guess would have to be understanding of that, but I can also see how that just comes off as like interrupting you and just not wanting to listen. It's emotionally challenging. I assume a bit more on like Liz's end because we did see before how like she doesn't feel quite like she's getting what she needs out of Eddie, and Eddie is a bit more detached in her and all of that. Liz has a hard time getting Eddie to listen, and Eddie feels Liz is too sensitive to criticism, which this thing we did see how Eddie does give Liz criticism and all of that, so that's there. Liz feels Eddie does not value her opinions or respect her intellectually. I can't say I'm surprised. They both need to learn to listen, and Eddie feels frustrated with Liz. I assume it's mostly like an internal thing of like he has this love-hate thing going on with Liz. I'm sure that would create frustration within him. Elizabeth's moon opposite Eddie's Jupiter. Emotions can get out of control and exaggeration of unkept promises. Their beliefs are in conflict. I want to know more about this traditional thing, and I'm not getting anything. This is the closest we're getting to potentially some traditional thing. But it's just like, it is just Eddie's past that is like throwing me off in all of this. Because even in my head, it just popped off of like, you know, I guess in the traditional way, I feel like women in the past were a lot more like compliant. Compliant is not the right word. A bit more like, you know, okay, under the rug with like, you know, men not being loyal to their wives and like keeping a mistress. I think compared to today's standards, like, which is not acceptable at all. But you know, that's, you know, Elizabeth is not a mistress though. She's like a full-on person that Eddie potentially left his family for. So I'm just, where is the tradition? They're attracted to the other because the other has what they need. I mean, to be honest, like, Eddie is the one, like, opening the doors and everything, seemingly. I'm not sure what Elizabeth, like, would have, I guess, you know, maybe at this point she was very much within her, like, star era. I mean, she's still in her star era in a way, but, like, when she really was, like, at the top of her game, you know. Liz may smother Eddie. I mean, going back to how she's possessive of Eddie, that's repeated. They both think the other is a bad influence. Elizabeth's moon trine Eddie's Pluto. There's an intense meeting and they both will need to let go of fake personas. There is a strong bond we're seeing again, and they both can transform each other, which I think we saw that Liz is the one transforming Eddie. They both bring change in social and political areas together, and they're involved in organizations together. They can solve problems in their community, and they can go through difficulties together. Eddie's moon is square Elizabeth's Mercury. This is a repeated aspect, just inverted, so everything from before is further emphasized, but also Eddie is not understanding of Liz's communication. This way, I guess I can see as well, in terms of like maybe Eddie is just wanting like a fast talker, someone that just also is like constantly communicating and all of that. Compared to Liz, she seems to be, with Eddie anyway, a bit quieter, a bit more on the, I don't want to say shy. She's not as like talkative though, it seems like, compared to Eddie. Eddie has a hard time getting Liz to listen, and Eddie feels Eddie does not value his opinions or respect him intellectually. This kind of does relate to how Eddie seems to want to give Liz criticism, but he sees her as being too sensitive to criticism. So maybe in that sort of way, he feels she's not really respecting his opinions and all of that. Liz feels Eddie is too sensitive to criticism, and Liz feels frustrated with Eddie. Eddie's moon is sextile Liz's Jupiter. Good fortune comes with this relationship, and they're a popular couple, which I think we've both seen already. They take emotional risks with the other, and there is honest communication. That it's likely for them to support charities, which we did see that they're, involved in like organizations together, making those social changes and all of that. Excessiveness could be an issue, and they have an intellectual understanding. Eddie's moon is square Elizabeth's Neptune. They misunderstand each other's signals. There is a lot of misunderstandings being repeated here. There's a possibility of avoiding and neglecting each other, which I really do see there. It seems like these two needed to have a balance that just was simply never reached, obviously, because we have seen domestically they don't really seem to be very compatible. And it seems like the relationship does better when they are, out and about doing their own thing, having their own independence, traveling and all of that. But there is a fine line between being too independent and also avoiding the domestic life, if that makes sense. Because if you are too independent, like, what's the point of having that relationship if you're never really seeing each other and all of that? So I'm not really surprised, because probably they are trying to, be independent, avoid the home life and all of it, because that seems to be where the problems really are. They're not very compatible in that area living together. So, and you're trying to do that, but in that way you end up neglecting each other. It is a weird balance that needs to be reached. I hope that all of that made sense. It's a confusing relationship, hopefully not like my little ramble just then. Eddie is unsure of Liz's intentions, and there is difficulty maintaining their relationship, and Eddie is sensitive to Liz's moods. So now it's time for Mercury. We have Elizabeth's Mercury in Pisces and Eddie's Mercury in Leo. Liz may find Eddie self-righteous and egotistic. I can't disagree. From what we have seen, Eddie can be too direct and brash for Liz. So yeah, that's something we've seen again as well. Liz can be a buzzkill for Eddie, and Eddie can be impatient with Liz, and they learn from each other. I really hope so. I mean, it seems like they do get something out of this relationship in the end, like they did grow from it and all of that, which is good. Elizabeth's Mercury overlaid in Eddie's 7th house. Liz senses Eddie will accept the way she thinks, and Liz finds it easy to communicate with Eddie. I mean, hopefully communication they kind of get in a good place. There's strong communication and an intellectual bond. Eddie's Mercury overlaid in Elizabeth's 8th house. Eddie can hurt Liz with words, not surprisingly so. It seems like his communication is just a bit much for Liz. Eddie is prone to dominating conversation. We're seeing again, blah, 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 I'm a jukebox. Liz takes conversation seriously, and the conversation tends to get deep quickly. There is clear and precise conversation, which honestly would be, I feel like, coming a bit more on Eddie's end. Like, if he's this really direct, brash, blunt guy, he would, be clear and precise. Maybe not so much precise, but clear for sure. Elizabeth's Mercury sextile Eddie's Jupiter. Eddie appreciates Liz's thoughts and ideas. Okay, maybe in certain ways he does. There is open communication and a strong friendship. We do keep seeing friendship sprinkled in here. There is an optimistic meaning. Again, I would be curious to see how they met because we've seen a few interesting points that don't exactly, really flow well together, They enjoy sharing ideas and opinions, and Eddie often gives Liz the benefit of the doubt. We're seeing again, they love to laugh together and business together is beneficial. We're also seeing again, like working together is beneficial and all of that. They enjoy traveling together and they intellectually stimulate each other. This I can get on board with because, we did see they kind of like both of them feel a bit like, not very respected intellectually by the other. So in this way, I can see them having an intellectual conversation would work. Because what did we see? Like the tension really gets them going and all of that. The chaos works for them. So if they are kind of arguing with each other intellectually, I imagine it would kind of work for these two. Elizabeth's Mercury square Eddie's Saturn. It's a teaching and learning relationship, and there's a deep respect for the other's intelligence. Liz feels inferior to Eddie, not really surprisingly so. Subtle competitiveness that can become destructive. From at this point in the reading, I'm feeling there really needs to be a fine line that these two need to balance on. And it really is a fine line of they want this sort of chaotic, tenuous relationship, but that can very easily become, destructive. It could, really be not great. So it really is subtlety that can become destructive in a way. There's serious tones in conversations, and Liz can be intimidated by Eddie's practicality. They both question their role in their relationship, and negativity and criticism sometimes takes over conversation. Eddie's Mercury trine Elizabeth's Venus. Liz is attracted to Eddie's intellect, and they both enjoy interacting with each other. There is warm communication, and they respect each other's thoughts and ideas. It's weird we're seeing this deep respect for the other's intelligence. I wonder if they are secretly into it. On the surface, they have, all this arguments, but deep down they really do have respect. To me, it feels like a sort of enemies to lovers thing. They seem like enemies, but they're actually in love, that sort of trope. Liz expands Eddie's artistic horizons and Liz softens Eddie. They are sensitive to each other and they enjoy the same movies and music. They share mutual friends. I'm not surprised because we keep seeing friendship here. They probably, if they didn't start as friends, they were definitely in the same, social circles. Eddie helps Liz verbalize her feelings. I mean, definitely in an exposure effect kind of way. I feel like if you do spend time with someone like Eddie, I feel like you would eventually, I wouldn't say pick up on his habits, but you would be forced to in a way to match his energy in that communication, because it really is a style of communication. You also kind of need to give back and match that energy. You're talking a lot, well, I also need to say a lot to communicate, It's not exactly a communication style that goes great with silence. I mean, if it does that, I'm kind of worried about that. Eddie's Mercury conjunct Elizabeth's Jupiter. Elizabeth introduces Eddie to lucky connections, so it seems like both of them help each other, opening new doors, the connections and all of that. Liz encourages Eddie to expand his horizon, so I assume that would be artistically so. It's a relationship of learning, and traveling strengthens their relationship. We're seeing again. There's a strong intellectual bond, and Eddie helps Liz be practical. Again, we're seeing his practicality and all of that, and helping Liz with that. Liz feels her thinking is valued by Eddie, and it's a favorable business partnership. We're seeing that again. And her thinking is valued by Eddie. I wonder in what way. Eddie's Mercury trine Elizabeth's Uranus. Eddie sees Liz as an intellectual companion. A lot of intellectual here. I wonder if them debating together is truly just their way of having that intellectual connection, that sort of tension, argument, all of that. They're perceptive and intuitive of each other, and there is open communication. I feel like we're seeing again. Eddie becomes more inventive around Liz, and they both work together on goals. They encourage each other's visions, and it's an ever-changing relationship. So now it's time for Venus. We have Elizabeth's Venus in Aries and Eddie's Venus in Leo. These are both fire signs. They are both spirited lovers and they both approach love with a direct and fiery attitude. Fiery is definitely the word for this relationship. Sparks fly, they admire each other and they both fall in love quickly. They both tend to be self-centered. That's a very interesting dynamic for these two, and I guess not really surprisingly so, because I don't have a timeline. I keep meaning to need one in this reading, but I assume by this point they would have both been decently established actors, and I'm sure in Hollywood, your ego does get a bit boosted, like both a bit self-centered. They may get competitive with each other, and when the relationship is good, it's very good. When it's bad, it's very bad. Yeah, treading that fine line here. It's like acrobats on those very tiny balance poles and all of that. Eddie may not get the admiration he wants from Liz. I feel like this is going right back to the beginning, isn't it? They have lots of fun together, and Eddie finds Liz charming and infuriating at the same time. And Liz finds Eddie exciting and infuriating at the same time. Elizabeth's Venus overlaid in Eddie's 8th house. Liz is captivated by Eddie, and Liz is willing to do anything for Eddie. It's a transformative relationship, which we've seen throughout the reading. Eddie's Venus overlaid in Elizabeth's 8th house, so this is a repeated overlay, just inverted, so everything from before is further emphasized, but also Eddie is captivated by Liz, and Eddie is willing to do anything for Liz. Elizabeth's Venus trine Eddie's Saturn. Eddie stabilizes Liz's emotions. If he is so stoic, I'm sure just being around him would kind of I bottle it up, that's not a great word, but I feel like that's what would happen if Liz is very emotional and then you have, Eddie not being so as much, being a bit more detached and all of that. I feel like you would tend to bottle up and stabilize in a way. There is a mutual dependence and there's a strong commitment as well. They can count on each other and they will sacrifice for each other. We did see that Eddie sacrifices his freedom for Elizabeth, so that's there. They see their relationship as everlasting and they respect each other. I have to assume seeing their relationship as everlasting would just have had to be in the beginning over anything else, because we did see resentment builds over time and all of that, so definitely more so in the beginning. They may help each other in jobs, not surprisingly, so we've seen this sprinkled throughout the reading. Liz admires the strength of Eddie, and Eddie teaches Liz how to use her creative energy, so definitely helping each other artistically for both of these two we've seen. Elizabeth's Venus square Eddie's Pluto. There's a fine line between love and hate. I know I keep saying this, but it really is a balancing act with these two. There's an intense fear of losing each other, and they both will need to deal with possessiveness, jealousy, emotions, which I feel like this would be a bit more on Elizabeth's end because we've seen her being more possessive. Otherwise, we honestly haven't seen a whole lot of possessiveness and jealousy, which is good. They cannot be just friends after, which we're seeing again another indicator that they ended things. The last one that we saw was, they have that mutual respect after the end, which that doesn't necessarily mean they're besties after, so it adds up. They bring out each other's deepest insecurities and power struggles are likely to happen. Eddie seems to have the higher power. Yeah, this has been seen throughout as well. Eddie's Venus opposite Elizabeth's Mars. They both try to assert themselves over the other. It seems like Eddie's a bit more successful with that, unfortunately, or fortunately, who knows. They easily get into conflict with the other, not surprisingly so, and jealousy and possessiveness may be an issue. I feel like, again, it seems to be more something that Elizabeth is worried about. It's an energetic and passionate relationship, and the desire for the other will always be there. Interesting. They both need to confront their own insecurities for this to work. Interesting take. Confidence seems to be actually quite decent here, but maybe there's sort of ways of communication needing that sort of chaos. Maybe that is stemming from an insecurity. Eddie sees Liz as too harsh, and Eddie may become manipulative to try get Liz to prove her feelings. Great. They need to overcome big differences, and Eddie feels he gives more than he gets. Didn't we see this on Elizabeth's end before as well? They both need to compromise for this to work, and Liz sees Eddie as lacking substance. I have to assume this would be emotional substance because it seems like she views him as being a bit too practical. And we did see Eddie is a bit more on the detached side, not like Elizabeth, so I wonder if this is just lacking emotional substance. Liz may come onto Eddie too strong and they misunderstand each other. So now it's on to Mars. We have Elizabeth's Mars in Pisces and Eddie's Mars in Gemini. These are both mutable signs. They are both scattered and they both have fluctuating energies. Jeez, that's... If they really both have fluctuating energies, that is an interesting spanner to throw in all of this. Eddie may hurt Liz and Liz may feel inferior to Eddie. We're seeing again. They both need constant change and they have contrasting styles of flirting and showing their love. Liz is willing to please Eddie and Eddie sees Liz as too passive and subtle. I mean, that seems to be how she is, so I can't really fault anything in there. They are both natural overthinkers. Elizabeth's Mars overlaid in Eddie's 6th house. Liz energizes Eddie and they exercise together, so I assume that is maybe somewhere where domestically they are pretty okay together. Liz is calmer around Eddie. I wonder if because Eddie is so, like, it seems like high energy, that kind of, forces Liz to be a bit more calmer. She just wants him, do his own thing and all of that. Because sometimes you do meet people and because of their energy, either mute yourself or, I was going to say turn the volume up. That's not the right way to put it. But you boost yourself up a bit more. So I wonder if it is a situation like that. Liz is easily flustered around Eddie and Eddie can see through Liz. Eddie's Mars overlaid in Liz's 6th house. So this is a repeated overlay, just inverted. So Eddie energizes Liz and Eddie is calmer around Liz. Eddie is easily flustered around Liz and Liz can see through Eddie. And Liz is more relaxed around Eddie, which would help her be calm around him. Their Mars signs are squared together, so they express assertiveness differently. Maybe Elizabeth is just a bit more subtle about it than Eddie, who's a bit more like extroverted with it. There's a lack of basic understanding of the other, not surprisingly so, honestly, is it? They push each other and they both need to learn to be patient with each other as well. It's difficult for a long-term relationship. Yeah, I feel like we have just kept seeing how long-term these two are really not it. Elizabeth's Mars opposite Eddie's Neptune. They have opposite approaches to self-expression. They have arguments about the differences between their wants in their relationship, and they need to be honest as a whole to work. I mean, yeah, honesty is always good, but I feel like that's kind of, I don't want to say the least of the issues, because obviously you need honesty, but I feel like other things are needed to make this work, aren't they? Eddie's Mars, Trine Elizabeth Saturn. Liz is the anchor in this relationship and they both can achieve a lot together. Eddie finds Liz's predictability attractive and Eddie feels he can depend on Liz. So we did see how they both feel they can count on each other. So it's nice that it's really emphasized on Eddie's end. Liz appreciates Eddie's individuality. Eddie's Mars square Elizabeth's Neptune. Circumstances in meeting were never understood by one of the parties. Us as well, or maybe it's just me. I'm a bit confused based off what we're seeing here. It seems like it could kind of be anything, I'm not gonna lie, because we've seen a lot of friends, we've seen mystery, we've seen optimism. It's just very, They need honesty to make the relationship work. We just saw, and it's not a bad thing. I just feel like it's kind of the least of their worries. Like, it's not like these two seem like they're hiding anything in particular. So that was the final aspect, bringing us to the end of the reading. If you are still watching, please share your thoughts below. I'd be very curious to see what you guys have to say about this one, particularly if you know a bit more about these two. I definitely need to look into how they met and everything, and the timeline, because I feel like that would really put some things into perspective for this reading. And of course, if you have made it this far, please consider subscribing for more. I post these readings weekly. And besides that, give this video a like and I will see you guys next time. Bye!